All right, can you do high intensity twice a week? I remember Jason Blaha, Ice Cream Fitness, used to always do like a bicep flex at the start of videos, but he has such shit insertions. He was so fat, never looked good, but that's what I'm gonna start doing. Anyway, I wanna make this video quick because every time I say I'm gonna make a video quick, I never make it quick. But I wanna start doing quicker videos because I need to have faith that people have, people aren't retarded, so they can actually, get these concepts with me, not over explaining them. So can you do high intensity training twice a week? Maybe. Some people can, and some people can do sort of a variation of twice a week training with high intensity. Biggest argument against high intensity is you can't do much frequency, and it's a valid argument. But the problem is, the reason we're not doing frequency with high intensity is because we're taking the gospel of Mike Mentzer and Dorian Yates, who had great advice, but these are guys from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. They didn't have the same data we have, and they're also genetic freaks on steroids who were fucking phenomenally strong. So they needed more recovery than you with average genetics, who is not that strong. So, and hopefully not in gear. So for many people, high intensity training twice a week, getting more frequency might actually be viable, but it's a bit more nuanced than yes or no. It depends on the person, and that's what I want to go over today. So the first things first is, what's your experience level? If you're new to the gym, you can fucking train high intensity training 2 to 3 times a week, full body, no worries. Partially because you're new, so you're fucking weak. So your connective tissues and your central nervous system not really taking much of a toll from training to failure. But really, you don't really need to be training to failure anyway, because you're new to the gym. So 2-3 reps in reserve, you'll be equally getting the same gains from reps in reserve for one set that you would then get if you went to actual failure, because you're so readily available to adapt. So if you're new to the gym or you're just weak in general from fucked up training, then don't even worry about going to failure. You get the same results from reps in reserve for one set. Shit's easy as fuck. And I get it. If you're a novice or you're new to the gym and you're just, coming across exercise advice videos, you know what I mean? And you're like, oh, this Mike Mentzer guy is really smart. This Dorian Yates guy, really smart. They are, but their advice is not necessarily for you, because you are new and you're weak and you can train with more frequency than those guys. So consider, if you're new to the gym or if you're a bit more of an intermediate, that will impact how much frequency you can get away with, based off the fact that you don't necessarily have to go to absolute failure. Your connective tissues in your central nervous system recover quicker because you're weak, and thus you can train with more frequency. And the more frequently you can get bouts of decent protein synthesis, well, you're going to get mathematically more gains. So novices, they can train with way more frequency. Intermediates, a little bit more frequency. Advanced, it starts to slow down. And as you get more experienced, your frequency might get a bit slower and slower. But in saying that, there are far more nuances that go into this that would even allow for more advanced trainers to do high intensity twice a week. So next point is muscle overlap or indirect stimulus. So there are certain muscles where you sure as shit don't want to be doing twice a week. The delts and triceps are a good example of this. The delts you already indirectly stimulate a bunch already. On your chest presses and on your rows and your pull downs, you're training your front, side, and rear delts indirectly. And thus, you don't want to do 2 shoulder days a week because you're already getting so much indirect stimulus. Triceps, the exact same thing. If you're doing a chest, shoulder, and arm day separately, you're indirectly and directly stimulating the triceps 2 to 3 times a week. And thus, you don't really need to be doing that much frequency with those muscles. Side note, one of the reasons why people's shoulders blow up so significantly when they switch to high intensity training when they're natural is the fact that they finally give their shoulders some time to rest, because they're not doing a shit ton of frequency and volume like they were when they're doing volume training. So when you switch to HIIT, you're actually giving your shoulders enough time to rest. And generally, some muscles, a lot of muscles, get enough time to rest, like the triceps, like the biceps. These muscles that get indirect stimulus already, you don't want to be training them twice a week. But then we have, on the total polar opposite, minimal indirect stimulus muscles. So calves, neck, traps, back to a certain degree, forearms, depending on a few different nuances I'll go over in a second. But calves, we'll use this as an example. The calves get almost no indirect stimulus from the rest of your training. They also have different fiber types. Your calves are vastly more type 1 dominant most of the time, well, depending on the person, which is another point I'll get into. But on average, your calves are a type 1 fiber dominant muscle. And thus, they get fuck all indirect stimulus, and they have more protective mechanisms against stress, and thus need more frequency due to those 2 factors. So certain muscles with certain muscle fiber types will need a little bit more frequency and a little bit more intensity and stimulus to make any real adaptations, calves being the best example. You either have good calf genetics or you don't. And it's well known that if you have bad calf genetics, it's hard as fuck to grow them. And part of that is a training problem. People don't train their calves enough and not with enough intensity. It's not like a bicep. they can take a mad fucking dosage of intensity and volume and frequency to make adaptation. A side note that I missed here is muscle fiber size also. If you have a muscle like the forearms where they're quite small, they recover a lot quicker than, say, a quadricep, which is very big and very weight demanding and puts more connective tissue damage and more central nervous system fatigue. So in the case of forearms, you might be able to train with more frequency, but then there's even more nuance in the sense that if you wear straps when you train, you get no indirect stimulus on your forearms, and thus you could probably train them twice a week. I always wear straps when I train back. I always wear straps when I do bicep curls because I don't want that to be the limiting factor for my biceps and back. So for me, I don't get any indirect stimulus on my forearms, and it's a muscle that is smaller and recovers quicker. So it would make more sense for someone like me who always wears straps because I'm a fucking pussy to always do 2, maybe even damn near 3 times a week forearm days, which leads me to the next point, which is everyone's different. Some people wear straps, some people don't. Most people are type 1 dominant in their calf fibers, but some people are actually type 2 dominant and they're really explosive and they do fuck all and their calves explode, right? In which case, that guy doesn't need to do high intensity training twice a week. Dorian Yates only needed to train his calves 1 set to failure every 7 days because he already had 19-inch calves before he even started training. He's a genetic phenom. So that guy probably has very type 2 dominant fucking calf fibers. Me, however, I need to train calves twice a week with more than just 1 set to failure, which is absolutely blasphemy. I'm doing 2, 3 sets to failure with a bunch of drop sets just to give my calves a reason to fucking adapt. There are people like Jeffrey Verity Schofield who can train so fucking frequently. He never deloads. He never takes days off. He does numerous sets to failure. He always trains to failure. He's never injured. He's never tired. He's always fucking progressively overloading. He's a workhorse. He can recover really quickly. Somewhere in the middle. I can recover decently, but nowhere as good as someone or the version of myself who was younger. So everyone's different in age. When I was 16, I used to do fucking full body workouts 4 times a week, and I would train like 4 fucking sets to failure every single time. If I did that today, at 27, 10 years later, I'd be fucking tearing connective tissues off the bone, I'd be tired as fuck all the time, and I would be regressing in weight. So if you're 55, you might not be able to recover as well as someone who's younger. Side note, once again, this video is gonna be long as fuck, I just know it, so whatever. Side note is, I've noticed a trend among high intensity advocates where they're older. And I think part of that is that when you get older, you can't train with as much frequency, and thus they just like doing that once a week training. Whereas if they did fucking like 3 or 4 sets with a rep and reserve and 2 to 3 times a week, they'd be tired as shit and they'd be injured because they're older. So everyone's different. Some people recover quicker, some people slower, some people older, some people younger. There's a lot of different nuances that go into this aspect. Next one is how much fatigue are you inducing? So if you're trying to train chest twice a week, but you're doing numerous sets to failure, you're doing drop sets, you're doing rest pauses, you're doing fucking 5 different exercises, then yeah, you're probably not gonna be able to train chest twice a week. And here's the thing, there's not necessarily anything wrong with just going crazy on that 1 session, but you might get better gains if you just pull it back a little bit. Don't do as many sets to failure. Don't go as beyond failure as you normally do. Maybe just go to mechanical or task failure and get the same results that you'd otherwise get from going crazy beyond failure, because the data is now showing that basically anything beyond failure is ridiculous. You just start to create more muscle damage than is necessary for effective protein synthesis. You're just creating more muscle damage. We're not actually getting any myofibrillar addition. So in the case of fatigue, how much are you inducing? And do you need to induce that much fatigue, that much muscle damage, or could you scale it back a little bit and then thus get more frequency of, say, chest days, back days, etc., and yield twice the amount of gains or significantly more gains by pulling it back and then getting more frequency? Next one, surplus or deficit. This should be a no-brainer, but if you're not considering this, then if you're in a surplus, you can probably recover a lot quicker than if you're in a deficit. Realistically, when you're in a deficit, you're just trying to basically maintain muscle unless you're really new to the gym. If you're remotely intermediate or advanced, then the deficit is mostly just to maintain the muscle that you built on the bulk. But if you're in a bulk, you can probably try to now acquire more gains by leveraging more frequencies. So that's just a side note more so, because there's not much I can say about that one. It should be a no-brainer. But if you're in deficit, yeah, probably don't try and do that much frequency. If you're in a surplus, then try to do more frequency. Next point is why twice a week. So kind of summing up why we're doing this is because if you're training with sufficient intensity, you're typically looking at about 48 to 72 hours of effective protein synthesis. Anything beyond that, too many drop sets, too many rest pauses, too many sets to failure, you're just eating into your recovery time by breaking down more and more muscle tissue. Then you need to acquire more myofibrillar additions. So after that 48 to 72 hours, you start to go into catabolism. You start to atrophy. There is no in-between state. You're either in anabolism or catabolism. There's no maintenance. So once you understand that, if you did Monday chest day, and you get, say, let's just say arbitrary number here, you add 3% muscle gain right from that session. You get protein synthesis for 3 days, say, and you get 3% muscle gain from that chest day. Well, by Thursday, you're now in atrophy. And by the time you get to the following Monday, 3 days after that, you might have lost a little bit of muscle. And thus, you didn't get optimal muscle gain from that. If you gain 3%, but you lose 1%, well, then you did 3 steps forward to take 1 step back. Whereas you did chest day on Monday, and then Thursday you did another chest day, well, all of a sudden, you've now yielded not just 3%, but potentially 6%, because you get 3% from the Monday, and then 3% from the Thursday, and you're always in anabolism in the chest. Now, obviously, not exact numbers here, but this is the idea, is you're guaranteed to lose some percentage of muscle after 3 to 4 days once that initial protein synthesis or anabolism is in effect. This is why you might want to do twice a week. This now leads me to the last 2 points, and I'll go over the first one first, which is how to know it is working. Easiest way to know if you are still making muscle gains from the amount of frequency you're doing is, are you, for one, progressively overloading? And then beyond that, do your connective tissues feel good, and is your central nervous system recovered? So are you still getting meaningful progressive overload at the similar rates that you were before you started enacting more frequency? Are you feeling tendonitis or any aches in your joints, or are they feeling, totally clear? And then are you feeling run down and tired as shit? Which, that one, I put that third because sometimes that can be way out of training related. And sometimes you will feel a bit of central nervous system fatigue, but if you're still progressively overloading and your connective tissues feel good, then you don't have much to worry about. But if you don't want to be tired all the time, then maybe not so much. So if those 3 things are in order, more so 2 things are in order, then you're golden. But a nuanced way of doing this is understanding that for many, 2 chest days a week, 2 back days a week, hitting certain muscle groups a week might not cut it. It's a bit more of a gray area. So calves, neck, traps, almost guarantee you can train twice a week and you'll be a-okay. It's not going to cut into your central nervous system's recovery demand, and the muscles themselves aren't going to be, you're not going to get connective tissue issues with traps, neck, and calf. Then somewhere in the middle, you may be able to do 2 chest days a week. You might be able to do 2 back days a week. And then you probably won't be able to train biceps, chest, and triceps directly twice a week. So it's a bit of a spectrum here. But then beyond that, okay, maybe you can't do 2 chest days a week. Maybe you can't do 2 back days a week. But what you can do is on Monday, you do your full-fledged high-intensity chest day. And then that following Thursday, let's say it's, leg day or whatever it might be, at the end of that session, you would just do 1 set of a chest press that generally encompasses the entire chest to get all the fibers hit. And you maybe do 1 or 2 reps in reserve. So enough stimulus to get some growth, but not so much stimulus, not so much volume that you can't recover from it. And that way you get 3%, say, from chest day on Monday, and then maybe you get 1% from the Thursday, or maybe no percent, but at the very least you don't get a minus from the muscle atrophy that you would otherwise get by not stimulating them at all. And then same with back day. Back day on Tuesday, slam that motherfucker, and then Friday you do a set of cable rows with 1 to 2 sets or 1 to 2 reps in reserve to just get sort of a feeder that carries you over to then that next Tuesday. And it wouldn't be too hard to experiment with this. It's very quite simple, really. You would start, let's say you're doing a bro split, chest day Monday, chest day Thursday. Do that for a few weeks. The progressive overload ceases to exist, or it slows down perhaps, then you know it's not working. So then you try the way I just mentioned, where you do sort of a feeder workout. You then do that, all of a sudden progressive overload's only getting better, or at the very least it's staying the same, but you know that you're maintaining that protein synthesis until the next full-fledged day. If you're doing full body high intensity training, this makes it even easier. If you normally train full body on Monday and then wait 7 days like the Mike Mensa, Dorian Yates style, maybe try doing full body Monday, then full body again on Saturday. So every 5 days. Progressively overloading still, very good. You're now mathematically getting more gains throughout the year by training with more frequency. And you just keep pushing the frequency of these different training sessions until eventually progressive overload or connective tissues start to become a problem. But you won't know until you try. But in saying all of this, some are better off keeping it stupid simple. Overcomplicating your program with all this frequency and all this auto-regulation of frequency could just be too much for some people. A lot of the reason people get into high intensity training is the simplicity of it. And if you start to overcomplicate it with frequency and like feeder workouts to maintain fucking anabolism and shit like that, that might not allow you to adhere 100% of the time. And then all of a sudden your workouts start to be hindered by the overcomplication. So by all means, you will get plenty of gains from once a week, once every 6 to 7 days high intensity training. This is not fear mongering. This isn't to say high intensity doesn't work. Obviously, it fucking works. I've done it for 2.5 years and made phenomenal gains doing it. However, it isn't to say that it's 100% optimal to do it the way that the old school guys have said it has to be done for decades without considering the newer data showing how muscles work. But anyway, if you can make it a little bit more complicated and yield a little bit better results, then do it. But if you can't, or you don't want to, or you just want to keep it stupid simple and do your high intensity every 7 days, fuck it, man. Who gives a shit? Keep it fun, because at the end of the day, what matters most is your training stays as simple as you can adhere to and as fun as you can adhere to. Those are the most important aspects, is that you just simply do it. But until next time, peace out, bye.